Chick Cushing. I live on Parker Road with my husband and 3 children, Vanessa, Gabriel, and Natalie. Scouting is deeply embedded in the history of our community, and Pembroke has participated since it came to America in 1910. Troop 43 was established in the 70s, and Troop 105 founded in 1968, which just celebrated their 70th Eagle Scout and has grown to almost 50 scouts, one of the largest troops in our district. My son Gabriel is in his 3rd year as a Cub Scout with Pac 105. Joining scouting has made a huge impact on his social skills, making friends, and giving him a sense of belonging. My oldest daughter Natalie is in AOL, which is her last year at Cub Scouts. She joined Pac 105 after a family campout she attended with her brother. She instantly connected with the boys her age and had so much fun learning to whittle, setting up camp, and practicing safe fire building skills. It was before we left that she said, "Mom, I'm not leaving here until you sign me up. This is what I want to do." She's extremely proud to be the first girl to join Pac 105, and her fellow AOLs are some of her very best friends. Since she joined, we have had other girls join at the Pac level, working side by side with the boys to work on achievements and experiencing fun outdoor adventures. Just briefly, Boy Scouts of America has had girls in their program since the early 1900s through their venturing and crew programs, but it wasn't until 2018 that girls were allowed to be part of the Cub Scouts and Scout BSA programs. Since then, thousands of girls in America have formed and joined troops, excited for the opportunity to experience outdoor adventures and earn the rank of Eagle Scout alongside their male peers. All troops remain single-gender or not co-ed, which leads me to why I'm here today. When we began to discuss options with Natalie, who would be soon graduating for Cub Scouts and moving on, her only options were to find an all-female troop in other surrounding towns or to give up on her scouting journey. She was deeply saddened at the thought of having to watch all her friends cross over to Troop 105 and remain here in town while she would have to leave. So for over a year, myself and a few other adults, Chick Cushing is our scoutmaster, we've worked hard to create Troop 143, which is Pembroke's very first Scouts BSA troop for girls. Now, our girls can experience the benefits of camaraderie, confidence, resilience, trustworthiness, courage, and kindness through a time-tested program that has been proven to build character and leadership right here in our town. Troop 143 will be hosting our very first open house on September 12th at the Bryantville Meeting House from 7 to 8:30 p.m., where parents and interested girls from the ages of 11 to 17 can come meet the leaders, find more about the program, and even enjoy some fire building skills and s'mores. Thank you so much for the opportunity to come speak tonight. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, I'm really excited to have an all-female troop. I think it's amazing, and I'm so glad that you guys came tonight, and look forward to future partnerships where maybe you'll come do some flag ceremonies. And so that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
Is the troop, so the troop is just Pembroke people?
So it's for Pembroke, but it is also open to surrounding towns.
Okay.
Yep.
'Cause I think it's amazing that you were able to get in this small town enough interest, among, young girls to do this. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, we have several girls who are planning on being at our open house that are already very excited and committed to joining. I think there's a lot of girls out there that want to do the same thing their brothers do or their dads did, and
They never had the chance.
and they
to.
never had the
Yeah.
opportunity until now. So yeah, there's a lot of interest, and we're really excited.
So you said that was September 12th. That's at what time at the Bryantville Meeting House?
7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m.
7 to 8:30.
at the
Okay.
Bryantville Meeting House. Yep.
That's great. I look forward to seeing how it grows. So,
Excellent. Yes, thank you so much.
thanks.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda, public comment. Did we have anybody who wished to speak? Oh, come on up.
Hi, everybody. How are you tonight? And congratulations, Patrick, on your selection as one of the candidates. We appreciate you serving and doing it all over again.
Thank you.
Look, I just want to put a couple of things on the table, and then you guys can take it with you and debate it and think about it, whatever the case is. So you don't have to answer questions or anything like that. I just want to put it on the table. The interview process for candidates for the vacancy, I appreciate all the time you put into that. 9 people up there, it's a lot of work, and not a little tension sometimes, I assume. One of the things that was done was the school committee and the select board asked the community to submit questions. And of course, that's very important because people listening or watching are waiting for their questions and whether or not they were going to be asked. Of course, we understand that you have to make decisions about which ones you're going to ask. There's a lot of them and all that kind of thing. But I was certainly one of those who submitted questions among others. And I didn't hear them even, being approached, but I understand the different explanations of that, but I wanted to put them on the table and say these questions matter at least to some people in the town, and they weren't addressed, and it's not about the candidates per se. They're just questions about policies and values and stands that people who are on our governance committees need to consider. Okay, so that's what it is. So it's a matter of information, not so much a matter of debate here. And I just wanted to put 3 or 4 questions out there, and I'll just sit down and you guys can move on with your meeting. Ones that you might believe were addressed by addressing other questions, so the crossover, as it were. So I understand that, but I'm talking about explicitly so. And I'd like to mention some of these for you and anyone who's listening and watching by video. Maybe these were some of your questions or concerns.
Are these questions
well.
these are the questions that you
Correct.
personally submitted?
Correct.
And just in fairness, Don, Patrick hasn't seen the questions because he was.
Yes.
Okay, just so that.
Oh, yes.
And to be clear, none of the questions are going to be answered.
Correct.
You're just putting on record
Yeah,
what questions you asked.
they were questions of values and
Yeah,
so
so
forth.
you're
So
not,
I'm just-
there's no expectation that any
No,
questions
none
are
at
answered.
all.
Okay.
I already said I'm going to say this,
Okay.
and then I'm going to take a seat, because I understand that, okay? So you'll be serving in the future, and these will come up again in May, obviously, so it's of concern to you. So here are some of them. Do you support the proposed legislation requiring all students to be fully vaccinated, including the COVID vaccine, with no medical or religious exemption? That's number 1. Number 2, do you support the proposed, let's call it sex education program, being considered by the State Department of Education? What do you like about the proposed program? What do you dislike about it? Number 3, do you believe that students' complaints that some ideologies and political and sexual agendas are being over-promoted is real? If so, what do you plan to do about it? And the last one is, should parents be informed if their son or daughter wants to change their personal pronouns or their gender? Okay, thank you for listening to me. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Okay.
Since you brought it up, just so people are aware, we had a list of probably like 40 questions between both boards and the public, and there was no way that all of those questions would ever be answered in one night. It would be next to impossible. So I thought personally that members did a good job sort of combining some of the questions, to make it, to get the idea across. We each asked, I think, probably 2 questions per candidate. We would have been there till 3 o'clock in the morning had we asked all of those questions. So I understand why those questions were important to you. The other thing is, I'll just take your vaccine question. I'm not answering it. I'm just going to say, that's not really within the work, that's not within our purview or part of the work that we're doing. So I respect that you want to understand that, understand the whole vaccine piece and what people think. However, that's something that our state legislators need to deal with. It's not something that we would ever have any don't know, influence over one way or the other. It doesn't involve part of our work. And so where we only had 2 questions each to ask, or, you know, around that per candidate, it didn't really make sense to then ask those, take time to ask those kind of questions, and then, like, you know, when it's not within the work that we need to get done in the next 8 months. So I just wanted to say that, like, I know people really, a lot of people gave some very well thought out questions, and we did the best we could to try to incorporate the questions within what needed to be done in order to appoint the correct person. So hopefully that explains it a little bit. But
So I'd like to say a couple of things, right? I actually don't know that this is even appropriate, given we have nothing related on the agenda whatsoever. To me, it's a bit out of left field, and it's something that it was a meeting, 2-3 weeks ago, August 21st. So I'm not even sure why
it's not,
it's germane.
uh,
But since we raised it, I would like to get, since it's now come before the committee that I'm sitting on, I would like to get all of the questions that were actually sent, right? Because the reality is we have something before this committee, and I don't even know what it says. I do, though, think that in fairness, I should have that opportunity to do that. I do think, though, that it's important for the record and for the folks watching on TV, because this isn't about a subversion of voice or anything else, or I don't believe it to be. To kind of the point you were making, Sue, 9 people had to make a decision that evening. And the one thing that the chairman of the Board of Selectmen put out there is you can ask whatever you want to ask. If you want to ask another question or some other question in order for you to get that data and that information, they had the ability to do that. Not seeing how many there were, what the questions were, what have you, it seems to me that the 9 people asked the questions they needed to make an informed decision. And whether they needed to ask those questions or in this case, they didn't need to ask those questions, it was up to the 9 people sitting around that table to do that, to make the decision and the informed decision that they made. Now, one would think you're biased because they appointed you, but I've also sat around on a committee that appointed someone. So I understand sort of what kind of has to be done to go around that. So I just think it's important for the record for folks to understand that that was the goal of that evening. And folks asked what they needed to ask in order to make the decision they felt was the right thing for Pembroke.
well, just to address, like, I'm not sure, like, the only questions that are being addressed tonight are the ones that Dawn just
Yep,
mentioned.
they're the only ones I even know about.
Yeah, so, and that's the only ones that are, like, you know, brought up tonight, are just those questions that he personally asked. So, you know, I'm just making that point. I think there's a process, right, to get
Yeah,
the.
I agree.
you
I
know,
would assume so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, and I think at this point now I can send them, they're a public document because, you know, it should be a public
Right, now
document.
that you're talking about it in public. it
Yeah.
becomes a public
Yep.
all right, well, so, does anybody have any other comments? All right, so we'll move on to, and there's no other public comment tonight? Okay. Any adjustments to the agenda other than that? So that brings us to the next point, which is, the next item is communications, and we're going to review protocols and expectations. So I think this is a really appropriate time to talk about what those are. And I know, you know, we want to make sure that we are talking about things within the bounds of the law. And I think it's important to discuss what that means, what open meeting law is, and make sure that everybody understands what's a public document and what is not a public document. So this was a good example, I guess, right?
Sure.
So if a document isn't talked about in the
Right, so
public.
an easy way to think about it is when I send you the packet on Thursday or Friday, none of that is public until it's sitting in front of you on Tuesday evening. So that is for your information only. There could be something in the packet that we don't get to that night or that we move to another meeting. That is not public until it's presented in a public meeting. So I know, you know, sometimes some of the things that we're talking about are things that, you know, come up in other circles, but unless it's presented and discussed in a public meeting, the document itself is not a public document. It's I'm pushing it out to you all. There's no conversation about the packet. It's just, here's the materials for Tuesday. I think that's it.
Absolutely. Can you speak to written communication from the public and what's appropriate to respond to and what's not?
Sure. So we've changed our communication channel slightly in the past few months. So before there was just the one mailbox, school committee at pembroke-k12.org. You each all have school committee mailboxes now. You should only be corresponding on school committee related business in those mailboxes. You should not be using your personal email. You should not be using your social media accounts or texting. All of that then becomes a public record if you're discussing school committee business on those platforms. When you are getting questions in your mailbox, because I can see them as well, because they do blind CC the school committee mailbox, I think getting back to people is of the utmost importance, right? You want to know, I got your message and it was heard, but pointing them in the right direction. So there's very little that you all can answer that comes in that mailbox, right? So just directing them in the right place, and I'm happy to help you all do that if you're not sure where the question should go. But again, you should really only be using your school committee mailbox. If you do choose to use a different mailbox, then everything in that mailbox becomes a public record. Everything on your cell phone becomes a public record. So you just want to make sure that you're keeping your private stuff private and your school committee business stuff separate.
Okay, that's good. And just a reminder to folks at home too, that if you text one of us on the committee and we don't respond, it's because we are being very careful of not making it a public record. So it's not advisable to be responding by text to school committee related business, which makes it difficult because I have a lot of friends that, might want to text me here or there about a school committee issue, and, I cannot be responding to somebody who's reaching out to me via text.
The other thing, for whatever it's worth, right, what I used to do a lot of is I tell people to call me, right? Because the one thing, and it's a fine line, it's hard, in that we want to be approachable. We want folks to tell us what they think. You want parents to come up to you. You want kids to talk to you, right? You want to hear from folks in the community. I used to tell people to call me, right? You can actually have a conversation. If we respond in writing, Allison's response can then get coupled with my response, can then get coupled with Sue's response, and all of a sudden you have 3 members of the board deliberating outside of an open meeting. That's why it's not because you're trying to hide something. It's about communication is important, and having conversations with parents and administrators and students, I think actually more than anybody, is super important, right? But we do need to make sure that we're doing it to either learn, gain insights, gain information, and that we are not deliberating outside of an open meeting. If somebody were to say to you, hey, I'm trying to get a feel for how you all feel about this, right? Again, that's something that would generally should go to the school committee mailbox. So if it's not about, Allison, what do you think of this math curriculum? Call me, we can talk about it. I'm looking to find out what all of you are thinking about, or what you as a committee are thinking about. That should go to the school committee mailbox, not even an individual mailbox.
Does anybody have any comments or questions? All right. Well, moving on then.
Can
Oh, go ahead.
maybe make a suggestion?
Sure.
Because the law is counterintuitive sometimes and makes it a bit inefficient, right? So what we think is the right thing to do sometimes isn't, and it takes a long time to learn the nuances. Would it make sense maybe for Joe just to do a brief on open meeting law to the committee?
Yeah, so whenever he comes for the rescheduled double 3 briefings, we can grab some more.
I think it'd
That's a great
make
idea.
a lot of
Okay.
sense.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You just have to come up to the mic so the people at home can hear you. Yep.
Just state your name and.
My name is Paige Graziano. Just in reference to what you were saying about texting and people texting you and you're unable to respond, I have the same thing with medical issues.
Yep.
A simple standardized response could be generated amongst the group that says something like, unfortunately, due to open meeting laws, I am unable to respond to this text. Please contact us at blah, blah, blah for these kinds of things. That way people know that you've received the message, but they also know that you're not going to discuss it there. And when people contact me about medical information on my private stuff, I have that little blurb, I spit it out, and then they say, but my cat, blah, blah, blah. I just spit the same response back out. And then if they ask me again, I spit it out again, and then I block them. Because they can't read. But that would make it much clearer that you've received the message, that there's an appropriate pathway to get that message addressed,
That's a good suggestion.
and that's it. And that way you guys can all have the same response.
That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, I
Thank
know,
you.
I know on my end it's gonna be hard, because I get parents like, my kid's bus, this and that, or
So
my.
that stuff is
like,
easy,
so-
those, you can answer
so
those questions.
that's where,
Where
like,
is their,
yeah.
where is the calendar?
Yeah, so
Where
that's
is
where, like,
that-
for me, like, knowing that, like, okay, it's not, like, the normal mom stuff that everybody, like, you know, like, trying to figure, like, community works together, like, where's the homework, you know, like, but then again, it's like, you know, knowing that if it's business, then it's, you know.
That's the right way to look at it. You actually just raised something that's really important, though. Sometimes, and I know I struggled with it when my kids were going through the school system. Sometimes we want to go and just put on a parent hat and be a parent. And you want to sit at an open house and you want to just hear about your kid. It doesn't happen, right? I mean, we ask people to vote for us and we ask people to put us behind this table, and that's one of the things you do give up. There's no such thing as responding as a parent versus responding to a school committee. The Attorney General doesn't delineate between those two things. So what you just said, Paige, I think is spot on, right? I think just a standard thing, because you don't want somebody to think we're ignoring them, that's just rude, I think is highly appropriate. So just, that's the other thing to be careful of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's tricky, poor kids.
Oh, it's hard.
Luckily, I think they all
Darting
know, they
to
know me at
different
this point, I think,
places,
for the
yeah, for
most
sure.
part, but it is definitely a little,
Well, it's an important conversation too, right? Because we have a lot of friends that are like, oh, you know, just want to ask us we need to know what the rules are, and they need to know what the rules are also, because they reach out to us for information, and, you know, it's good to be on record about what it is.
And just to be clear, the school committee has nothing to do with snow days. So don't text them and ask if it's there. They're not even a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Only Aaron Tinker makes that decision,
Yeah.
is what I understand.
Exactly.